The US-China trade war has escalated dramatically, severely impacting China's export trade, and the country's economy may be on the brink of collapse. However, the economic downturn in China didn't start with the US trade war. Under President Xi Jinping, China's economic growth has significantly slowed compared to previous administrations, marking a major turning point in the country's trajectory. Over the past 5 years, China's economic difficulties have intensified, especially amidst fierce global competition, tariffs, and overcapacity. The big question now is, how much further can Xi Jinping regime endure? And how has he contributed to the downfall of the Chinese economy, which once supported the legitimacy of the Communist Party? Looking back, after the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, the Communist Party launched numerous political campaigns that led to intense internal strife, pushing the country to the brink of economic collapse. On 18 December 1978, during the third plenary session of the 11th Central Committee, Deng Xiaoping set the course for Chinese economic reform. Backed by international capital and supported by promises of human rights and political reforms, China took advantage of its demographic dividend to become the world's factory, ultimately growing into the second largest economy globally. However, Taiwanese writer Kenneth Fan expresses in his book Post-CCP China that the end of China's reform period began in 2012 and came to a close by 2020. The main reason was that the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, ran out of funds, as money is the backbone of the party's totalitarian machinery. Others suggest that the sudden death of former Premier Li Keqiang in 2023, shortly after his retirement, marked the definitive end of the reform era. In the 2 decades before 2020, China's major cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou saw significant economic growth due to the real estate boom. However, many rural areas including Dalian Mountain in Sichuan and remote mountainous regions in Yunnan and Guizhou still face dire conditions. In these places, many children are unable to afford an education, and as Li Keqiang once pointed out, 600 million people in China earn less than 1,000 yuan a month. That's equivalent to less than $137 a month. In today's high inflation economy, it's increasingly difficult for people to survive on such a small income. Since Xi Jinping began his second term in 2017, political chaos has unfolded in the Chinese leadership's headquarters, Zhongnanhai. On the global stage, this coincided with President Trump's first term, and the intensifying US-China trade war dealt as a severe blow to China's economy, leaving Beijing in a passive position. When Trump failed to secure a second term in 2020, Xi Jinping managed to regain some stability. However, it was in 2020 that Chinese economic problems truly began to surface. Despite a steady slowdown in GDP growth from 2012 to 2019, the general public remained optimistic about the future. But by 2020, rising property prices, a decline in consumer confidence, and a continued slowdown in economic growth started to signal growing concerns. Along with internal conflicts within the Communist Party, Beijing's shift towards more extreme policies since 2020 has sparked widespread public dissatisfaction. In 2020, Xi Jinping launched the Common Prosperity Policy, claiming it would address social inequality and income distribution issues. The crackdown on the financial services and technology company Ant Group and its founder Jack Ma in November 2020 became a defining moment of this policy. This was followed by strict regulatory measures targeting the real estate bubble and internet companies. While these policies seem designed to shift social tensions, in practice they have failed to effectively ease economic pressure. According to the social media commentator posting as Toronto Big Face, economic theory suggests that income inequality does not directly cause insufficient consumption. While inequality can sometimes affect consumption power, the issue is more complex. For example, despite a significant wealth gap, the United States remains strong consumer spending, while countries like Japan and those in Northern Europe with smaller wealth gaps have long faced sluggish consumption. These examples show that simply attributing consumption issues to inequality does not provide a comprehensive solution. Toronto Big Face argues that Xi Jinping's Common Prosperity Policy resembles an extreme form of class struggle, where the government targets the rich, forcing them to donate to redistribution. However, this approach has not resolved the economic crisis, rather it has worsened social instability, especially with the mass departure of wealthy individuals and foreign capital. The COVID-19 pandemic, which originated in Wuhan, China, quickly spread across the globe in 2020, causing widespread disruptions. China's strict zero-COVID policy caused significant humanitarian suffering, massive economic losses, and heavy fiscal burdens at the local government level. However, regions in China that did not experience full lockdowns were able to continue production, benefiting from global market demand and temporarily avoiding a severe recession. Although this situation did not last, as the global pandemic subsided and countries resumed production, China's unique advantage during the pandemic quickly became irrelevant. By 2023, as the global economy fully recovered, China's export began to decline. In particular, the excess capacity accumulated during the pandemic struggled to align with the renewed global demand. The Chinese government responded by ramping up production and offering low-cost clearance measures to maintain market share. However, this strategy, which sacrificed domestic demand, did not address the underlying overcapacity problem. To maintain high export volumes, China resorted to cost-cutting and reducing labor wages, further exacerbating the domestic competition. During this period, Xi Jinping failed to adjust policies in a timely manner, resulting in an excessive reliance on exports. Domestic consumption growth could not keep pace with productivity gains, resulting in a severe overcapacity issue. Meanwhile, other countries began responding by raising tariffs, undermining China's low-cost competitive advantage. As global tariffs on Chinese goods rose, especially in 2024, multiple countries imposed heavy taxes on electric vehicles and other products from China, posing major obstacles to its price-driven strategy. For instance, the United States imposed a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, while the European Union raised tariffs on Chinese EVs to as high as 45.3%. In 2024, the World Trade Organization ruled on nearly 200 cases against China, with most initiated by developing countries. This wave of trade disputes placed heavy pressure on China's export and further intensified economic challenges at home. Facing rising global tariffs, Xi Jinping introduced a trade-in program offering government subsidies to boost domestic consumption by encouraging purchases of household appliances and electric vehicles. However, analysts point out that China's overcapacity problems requires deep structural reforms, not temporary stimulus measures. Independent commentator Toronto Big Face says that from promoting common prosperity to relying heavily on exports to persisting with low-price competition despite rising global tariffs, Xi Jinping's economic policies have largely failed to address China's deeper structural issues. Toronto Big Face also noted that China's economic troubles are not the result of a single event but are the product of years of accumulated structural problems. He compared China's economic decline to an illness, saying Xi Jinping is like a doctor who misdiagnosed the patient. Although some of Xi's measures appear to address the symptoms, they ultimately failed to cure the underlying disease. Some experts have also examined Xi's direction from a political perspective. Associate Professor Su Chia-hao from C1 College at Taiwan's National Sun Yat-sen University pointed out that Xi Jinping has not continued former CCP chairman Deng Xiaoping's tradition of economic reform but has made significant adjustments. Xi is concerned about the rise of excessive capitalism within China, has sought to return to Marxist-Leninist and Maoist traditions by tightening controls over private capital. Although Xi publicly claims to uphold economic reform, in reality he has imposed heavier restrictions on private enterprises. Assistant Research Fellow Kun Shanshong from Taiwan's Institute of National Defense and Security Research said Xi Jinping is effectively reversing economic reform. Many of China's dynamic sectors such as e-commerce and startups grew rapidly under the former president Hu Jintao's leadership. Under Xi, the government has moved to tighten control over capital, bringing the achievements of past reforms back under state ownership. The takeover of successful private companies like Alibaba clearly reflects this trend. Chinese state media have repeatedly claimed over the past 2 years that confidence and determination in economic reform will not waver. And although the government has announced measures such as easing restrictions on foreign investments in manufacturing, analysts believe these moves were driven by the severe post-pandemic economic downturn rather than a true commitment to liberalization. Similarly, after suffering setbacks from the zero-COVID policies and the US-China trade war during Trump's first term, Xi Jinping has had to face the consequences. The decoupling of US-China technology sectors and the relocation of industries to Southeast Asia and in India have left China in urgent need of attracting back foreign investment and industries. With domestic demand alone no longer sufficient to sustain economic growth, China has been forced to reopen to the world. Starting in 2023, a series of new laws, including the Foreign Relations Law, the Anti-Espionage Law, and the Anti-Foreign Sanction Law, have heightened security risk for foreign nationals and companies operating in China. These measures contradict the government's effort to promote openness and have in fact pushed foreign investment away from China. Although the zero-COVID policy officially ended in 2023, the Chinese economy has not recovered. Under the leadership of current Premier Li Qiang, a close ally of Xi Jinping, the State Council has served as the executor of Xi's economic agenda. Across China, salary cuts have become widespread, affecting civil servants, teachers, and even entertainers. Layoffs, rising unemployment, inflation, and mounting mortgage pressures have only added to the economic strain. By 2024, consumption downgraded had become a widespread social issue. China Affair expert Wang He noted two unexpected developments in 2024. First, the collapse of the so-called Chinese economic miracle. Second, the collapse of public confidence in the Communist Party's ability to risk the economy. Wang explained that although China's economy was already in serious trouble in 2023, many people still hoped in early 2024 that the major policy measures would be introduced to reverse the downturn. By the end of 2024, it had become clear that the Communist Party had no effective solutions. China is now rapidly moving towards collapse, resembling the Soviet Union's economic crisis before its dissolution. Wang further explained that after the 2008 global financial crisis, the Chinese government launched a 4 trillion yuan stimulus package equivalent to $137 billion US. While it helped stabilize the economy at the time, it also created massive debt and overcapacity issues. Some people had hoped for another massive stimulus this time. However, the movement of foreign capital in and out of China throughout 2023 and 2024 shows that investors no longer trust Beijing's ability to turn the economy around. Xi Jinping once appeared unstoppable, successfully amending the constitution and consolidating his grip on power, but today he faces mounting challenges both at home and abroad. Commentator Wang Youchun believes that at least 9 major policymakers, both internal and external, have led to Xi's current predicament. Among them, he points to Xi's failure to genuinely tackle corruption, as he left Jiang Zemin's factions untouched, resulting in a loss of public trust. Although Xi once admitted there were 1,000 reasons to manage US-China relations well, he instead chose to frame the United States as China's primary adversary. While pledging to defend sovereignty and territorial integrity, Xi refuses to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, continuing instead to provide economic and even military support to Moscow during the conflict. Wang also highlighted Xi's handling of the COVID-19 outbreak. After the virus emerged in 2020, Xi enforced 3 years of extreme zero-COVID lockdowns. Under this policy, healthcare, livelihood, the economy, human rights, and education were all sacrificed in the name of eliminating the virus, a goal scientists regarded as unrealistic and unscientific. From harsh lockdowns to the abrupt abandonment of the zero-COVID policy, the Chinese government caused a massive number of avoidable deaths, contributing to today's population decline. Wang further criticized Xi's approach to Taiwan, arguing that instead of winning over the Taiwanese people, Xi resorted to maximize pressure tactics. In Hong Kong, his crackdown stripped away the democratic freedom citizens once enjoyed under British rule, seriously damaging the city's standing as an international financial hub. China's affairs expert Yue Shan remarked that Xi Jinping was once dealt a strong hand, yet squandered it completely, leaving many observers with deep regret. Yue argued that had Xi managed to guide China towards a more prosperous and open society, he could have secured lasting power. Instead, Xi's downfall began with his 2017 public pledge of loyalty to the Communist Party's founding fathers. Since then, both the political elite and ordinary citizens have steadily lost faith in him, a dangerous sign for any regime. After taking power, Xi promoted wolf warrior diplomacy, an aggressive nationalistic approach to foreign relations, and adopted a more confrontational stance towards the United States. In 2021, he introduced the slogan, "The East is rising and the West is declining," openly revealing his ambition to compete with the US for global leadership. He claimed that China can now stand as an equal to the world. Yet, in reality, China's economy has stagnated over the past few years. Recently, Chinese academic and economist Shangs Speech delivered a public speech stating that the true purpose of a country's economic development is not to show off or to become the global leader. It is to lift every citizen out of poverty and ensure access to pensions, education, housing, and healthcare. That should be the real goal of economic growth. Xiang further emphasized that even if China surpasses the United States in GDP or becomes the world's largest economy, it would not automatically make China a true global leader. Leadership, he said, requires creativity, influence, humanistic values, and the ability to lead the world in technology and culture, qualities that command lasting international respect. He also expressed frustration with economists who constantly debate when China will surpass the US. There are still so many poor people in China, so many without secure pensions and medical insurance. Zhang asked why the focus is not on solving these real problems. As 2025 began, President Donald Trump took office and immediately reignited the US-China tariff war, this time directly targeting the Chinese Communist regime. The trade war escalated rapidly after multiple rounds of tariff hikes. US tariffs on Chinese goods soared to 145%, while Chinese tariff on US goods rose to 125%. In response, Chinese authorities promoted a domestic circulation strategy aiming to expand domestic demand as a long-term solution. However, Chinese industry insiders have posted videos warning that the result of the trade war is inevitable. Factories once dependent on exports are now turning inward, flooding the domestic market and fueling intense domestic competition. US-based economist Davey Huang noted that based on historical trends in human and economic development, China appeared to be heading back towards a planned economy. As officials with limited industry expertise take control, inefficiencies are expected to rise, putting even greater downward pressure on the economy. He warned that China risks drifting further away from the global economy and could face a systematic economic crisis. In a recent speech, Chinese economist Shangs predicted that even under the most optimistic projections, China's exports will decline by 10 to 15% this year. With excess production shifting from foreign markets to domestic sales, he warned that a brutal price war is inevitable. Xiang described the severity of the situation as far beyond imagination, calling it a life or death moment for China's economy.